Students, 10th standard social science, another key chapter under geography, transport and communication. These two words are quite familiar to you. I need not explain the meaning of the words. We use them in our day-to-day conversations. Transport in a country, we can compare it with the circulatory system of our human body. If transport comes to a halt, it's as if the nation has become a non-functional. Circulation is compared to transport. Then communication, you can compare it with the nervous system of the body. The nerves in the body can be compared to the communication. Both transport and communication are very important from the viewpoint of progress of the nation. If our country has to become a well-reckoned power in the world, we need to achieve economic growth. Economically, we should be able to put up our best foot forward. If the economic development has to take place, you should have a very good network of roads in the country. Besides, the communication aspect too has to be attended very well by the government and it is to be maintained. Now let us see, we'll go into the details. The use of transport and communication depends upon our need to move things from place to place. Their availability to the place of their use. Human beings use various methods to move goods, commodities, ideas from one place to another. If you look into the day-to-day functioning of the state, you appreciate very much the need to transport goods from one region of the country to the other. Our highways, if you just look at them, how busy they are, carrying goods from one remote corner of the country to the other corner. Earlier we had a normal road system. Today we have highways. And highways are all busy, very busy. So a good transport system is very much essential to the country from the viewpoint of shifting commodities, goods, commodities, services from one place to another. Next. Means of transport can be divided into three areas. One, land transport. The other one, water transport. And the third is aerial transport. Transport by air. Land transport. Again, if you try to dissect it, you have the roadways. We need a very good system of network of roads. Railways play a key role. Then you have pipelines. We will be going through them one by one. Under water, you have inland services and overseas. Connectivity with other countries in the international waters. Inland, we have canals. We have transport through rivers. All these come in the inland aspect. Then you have the air services. Domestic airways, what concentrates on transport within the country. Then international airways. Under domestic airways, you have public undertaking and you have the private airlines too. Now, this is a simple schedule of the means of transport. We will go into the details now. The line transport we will take up first. The pathways and unmetalled roads have been used for transportation in India since ancient times. Even if you go to that historical period, 3,000, 4,000 years ago, there were roads connecting one capital with the other. They were a necessity. But we did not have metal roads then. They were all unmetalled roads and pathways. If people keep on traversing through a particular path, even grass won't grow there and the path gets structured and everyone will follow the same path. They were pathways. From pathways we came to unmetalled roads because bullock carts and horse carts had to move and soldiers used to go on horses. So unmetalled roads. But today most of the roads in the country, they are all metal roads. Have been used for transportation in India since ancient times. With the economics and technological development, metal roads, today you see metal roads and railway were developed to move large volume of goods. Huge quantum of goods are moved and people from one place to another. Ropeways are there, ropeways also line transport. Cableways and pipelines were devised to cater to the demands of transporting specific goods under special circumstances. Now these ropeways and cableways you see wherever you have tourist spots or temples at the top of a hillock and devotees have to keep moving. You use ropeways. Or even in places like Simla where tourists have to move, ropeways are used. Or in factories. Okay, next. Land transport, road transport. India has one of the largest road networks in the world with a length of 42.3 lakh kilometers. About 85% of the passenger and 70% of freight traffic, goods, material, commodities are carried by roads every year. So road transport proves to be a key method of shifting goods from one place to the other. Road transport is suitable for short distance travel. Next. For the purpose of construction and maintenance, roads are classified. You see a varieties of roads in the country. First one, national highways, state highways maintained by the state. National highways are maintained by the central government. Then district roads, they come under the district administration. You have village roads, those which connect one village with the other, village roads. Then border roads in the border areas between India and Pakistan, India and China, for moving our soldiers, the army, we need roads there. Vehicles have to move. So border roads, then express and superways. Special high quality roads. They are express and superways. Next. National highways. They connect the state capital, major cities, important ports, railway junctions, etc. National highways come under the control of the central government. They are constructed and maintained by central government. The key point to be remembered. The length of national highway was 1,32,000 kilometers in 2019. See? Huge. Our achievement in this area is huge. The national highways constitute only 1.67% of the total road length and carry 40% of road traffic. The NHAI, National Highway Authority of India, a separate authority has been established to look after these construction and maintenance. He is entrusted with the responsibility of development, maintenance, and operation of national highways all over the country. Next, National Highway Development Projects, Golden Quadrilateral. We frequently use this term, Golden Quadrilateral. It's a big achievement. In Atal Bihari Vajpayee's period, the entire project started. It has reached its finish now. We have a very good Golden Quadrilateral connecting many of the cities in the country, and it has proved to be something of great merit from the viewpoint of transportation. It comprises construction of 5,846 kilometers long, 4 by 6 lane, either 2 plus 2 on either sides, 2 to go and 2 to return, or 3 plus 3, 6 lanes, 4 lanes or 6 lanes, high density traffic corridors, high density traffic. In spite of 6 lanes too, you find heavy traffic on these to connect India's 4 big metro cities of Delhi, north, Mumbai in the west, Chennai and Kolkata in the east. These 4 cities are connected by the Golden Quadrilateral. The time, distance and cost of movement among the mega cities of India has been considerably minimized. It's given a big push to the industrial development in the country. A very big push. The whole country has got minimized in its size from the practical viewpoint of moving people and goods from one point to the other. Next, north, south and east, west corridors. Now Golden Quadrilateral, it's a quadrilateral connecting Delhi, Bombay, Chennai and Kolkata. As if that was not enough, we have connected east with the west and north with the south with special corridor highways. North-south corridor aims at connecting Srinagar in the north with Cape Comorin in north, Kanyakumari in the south. It connects the northernmost point of the country to the southernmost point of the country. That is the north-south corridor. Srinagar in Jammu and Kashmir with Kanyakumari in Tamil Nadu, including Kochi and Salem, Selampur. They have been connected with the same. With 4,076 kilometers long road, it runs like this from north to south. The east-west corridor, easternmost point with the westernmost point in the east, you have Silchar. East-west corridor has been planned to connect Silchar in Assam with the port town of Porbandar in Gujarat with 3,640 kilometers of road length. So the north-south corridor and east-west corridor together it gives the plus result. So the Golden Quadrilateral added with that, these two east-west and north-south corridors have made the entire country get united by way of transportation system. Next, here we have the map. You can see here, this is the Golden Quadrilateral. Delhi is here. From Delhi, you have Udaipur, Jaipur, Ahmedabad, Vadodara comes to Mumbai. From Mumbai down to Bangalore, it moves up Chennai, goes up Visakhapatnam. All the key ports are connected, reaches Kolkata. From there it takes a turn towards Varanasi, Kanpur, Agra, Delhi. See, this is the Golden Quadrilateral. Even the shape itself is quite interesting. It's a quadrilateral. That's why you call it a quadrilateral that has proved to be golden to the country. Golden Quadrilateral. An important achievement of free India today. Then, added to that, we said, north-south corridor. From Srinagar comes down, connects Delhi, capital of India, Agra, comes down to Jhansi, Nagpur, Hyderabad comes to south and it ends up at with Kanyakumari, reaching Kanyakumari. See, going from the northern point to the southern point. Then the east-west corridor. It starts from Porbandar here. Either you can say that way or say we start from Silchar in Assam. You can tell that way too. Silchar, Assam. See, the blue line shows comes to Kanpur. Kanpur to you have the Porbandar here. Porbandar comes to Udaipur. Porbandar in Gujarat, the place of birth of Gandhiji. So this is the east-west corridor. These have to be understood. Then it's very easy to remember. Understand it well on the India map or map of transport. Okay, next. State highways now. We come to the next lower level. State governments maintain them. These are constructed and maintained by the state government. State highways in Karnataka are maintained by the Karnataka state government. Those in Maharashtra are maintained by the Maharashtra state government. It's their responsibility. Join state capitals with the district headquarters. All the district headquarters in that particular state have to get connected with the state capital. There's a prime issue here. And other important towns, if you have industrial towns, if you have ports which are other than district capitals, you connect them to. So you should give a big push to the economical development of the state. This constitutes 4% of total road length. 4% of the total road length lies with the states. Mostly it is 1+1. Mostly state highways are 1+1, but sometimes they might have gone even for 2+2. District roads connect district headquarters and the other important roads in the district. The highways may not be enough state highways. National highways are there, state highways are there. Still you have key places. You have temple towns there, small industrial towns are there. You have mining, maybe forest areas are there. All these have to get connected within the district. For that, the district has to think of district roads, which give a push to the industrial activities in the district. Now you come to rural roads. These account for 60.83% of total road length. Not insignificant, very significant. At the lowest level, you should be able to build up if the country has to become strong. Now you come to rural roads. Rural roads. Every village has to get connected with the other villages. Bullock carts, cars, small vehicles, they all should be able to move. Buses should be able to move. Transportation should be given the needed emphasis. 33.86%, almost 1/3 of the total road length in India is categorized as rural roads. See how much importance we have given to the rural economic development. You can make out. Next, border roads. The Border Road Organization, that we call as BRO in short, was established in 1960. As if all this is not enough, we have brought in BRO that concentrates on building roads in the border areas. Usually border areas are full of hills and mountains. Our entire northern border is one of mountainous regions. Was established in order to accelerate the economic development, defense preparedness. See, one is economic development, forest production or maybe mining or dams bearing. Then defense preparedness. You should be prepared for any eventual attack by your neighbors, maybe Pakistan or China. If good roads are there, you have military mobility, then you can move the military vehicles and military immediately as soon as you get the warning. The BRO also undertakes snow clearance in high altitudes. But a big job you see in Kashmir, Simla, Assam, and these places. When snowfall is there, the BRO has to keep these roads clear from the snow that has got collected. It has to be swept, ice has to be swept aside. It has constructed roads in high altitudes joining Chandigarh with Manali. Chandigarh with Manali. Manali is a place of tourism, known for tourism. And Leh, at an average altitude of 4,270 meters above the mean sea level. This is about 4.3 kilometers. 4.3 kilometers from the mean sea level. So, Manali and Leh, they are at a height of 4.3 kilometers from the sea level. Maintaining roads at that height, building roads, maintaining roads, is a big challenge, and India has been able to prove through its method. Rail transport, Indian railways. Now under land, rail transport is another key area. And we have a huge network in India, especially in the north. Because in the northern part of India, you have few hills and mountains. It's all a plain, Indo-Gangetic plain. And you can have a good railway system. In south, it's a bit difficult. But in south too, we have built up now. But north, especially Bihar, UP, Bengal, Punjab, Gujarat, these places have a beautiful network of railways because the area is a plain. Indian Railways network is one of the longest in the world. Longest network we have. Because the rail travel is very cheap. Keep in mind. Rail travel is very, very cheap. You can say damn cheap compared to travel by road transport. It was introduced in 1853, a little before the first war of Indian independence, when a line was constructed from Bombay to Thane. Bombay to Thane. That was around 34 kilometers. So the first train moved from Bombay to Thane. That was the beginning of Indian Railways. Largest government undertaking in the country. It's the largest government undertaking. Entire railway network is under the control of the central government. It employs the largest number of employees in any undertaking in the world. We stand first. The railways have the largest number of employees compared to any undertaking in the entire world. The length of Indian Railways network is a mammoth figure you see again. It's not in just thousands. 67,420 kilometers. Railway system has been divided into 16 zones for good administration. They have been divided into zones. Each zone functions as if it's an independent unit, but ultimately it comes under the Central Railway Authority. Next. Pipelines. Pipelines are the most convenient and efficient mode of transporting liquids and gases over long distances. Say petroleum, diesel will be transported. So you need pipelines. Once laying a pipeline may tend to be costly, but once you lay it, once it becomes functional, it starts functioning, it works out to be very, very cheap. Very cheap. So over long distances, transporting liquids and transporting gases will tend to be very cheap. Even solids can also be transported by pipelines after converting them into slurry. See, from Kudremur, over a period of time, coal was getting transported, not coal, I'm sorry, it's iron. Iron was transported to Mangalore through pipelines. Water was being made to rush through the pipes, and the iron ore was getting transported mixed with water. It used to go and get decamped into steamers. Oil India Limited, they convert it into slurry. The solid powder or solid blocks, they are mixed with water, made into a slurry and made to move along the pipes. Oil India Limited, we call it as oil, under the administrative setup of the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, is engaged in exploration, production and transportation of crude oil and natural gas. It was incorporated in 1959 as a company, but today it's made big strides, great advances, big strides. Okay, next. Water transport. Cheapest means of transport, because you don't have barriers there in water. So transportation by water proves to be very, very cheap. Most suitable for carrying heavy and bulky material. It is a fuel and eco-friendly mode of transport. You don't need any special routes or roads to be set. Water transport is of two types. One is inland, the other is ocean, overseas. Those which go overseas. Next, inland waterways. India has 14,500 kilometers of navigable waterways. Take example of Kerala. Kerala has the river system there, which they have got very well set for water transport. They have converted it into waterways. It contributes to 1% to the country's transportation. It comprises rivers, canals, backwaters, etc. The government of India has the plan with it. It depends as to when it will go on a big scale. The river garland system connecting all the rivers of India, that would definitely facilitate water transportation if taken up. But it costs a very huge amount to get the entire project completed. But on a small scale, they have already started it on experimental basis. The project is ready. It all depends as to when it can be taken up on a big scale. Inland Waterways Authority was set up in 1986 for the development, maintenance and regulation of national waterways. Now Ganga, from Kolkata up to Varanasi, Ganga has been properly set, if necessary modified, into a waterway. Huge ships can come up to Varanasi from Kolkata because Ganga is being used by us as a waterway now. From Varanasi they plan to move up to Kanpur. That is the next stage. Plans are there. As once it is commissioned, it will work out to be very cheap. Next. Ocean waterways. 12 major and 185 minor ports provide infrastructural support to oceanic routes. We have 12 major ports in the country. We have 185 minor ports. All these have given a big push to our ocean waterways. Even from the fishing point of view, these minor ports turn to be very important. They provide infrastructural support to oceanic routes. 95% of India's foreign trade by volume, 70% by value moves from ocean routes because it proves to be very cheap. It takes time. Compared to air travel, it takes time. Now, if you want to transport vaccines from one place to the other, you choose the air travel. It has to be sent by air. You can't plan to send it by ship. Apart from the international trade, these are also used for the purpose of transportation between the islands and the rest of the country. Say from Andaman and Nicobar to the mainland, or Lakshadweep to the mainland, or our neighbor Maldives and Sri Lanka to our mainland. The only transport available, cheap transport available, is the oceanic travel or travel through sea. Huge ships can move here. Next, major seaports of India, very important. Remember, you may be asked to locate them on the map of India. We start from Kandla. Kandla is in Gujarat. It's in the Gulf here, Gulf. Then coming down, you have Mumbai here, a huge port. Mumbai port has too much of traffic. For that reason, they have started Nhava Sheva, a little down below. Nhava Sheva, another huge area, huge port, huge seaport, Nhava Sheva. Coming down, you have Marmagova. Marmagova or Margova, it is in Goa. It's in Goa. Come down, you have Mangalore, Mangalore port. You have one more fisheries port here, a key port, that's Malpe, near Udupi. Come down, you have Mangalore. Go down now to Kerala, you have Cochin. Cochin port, a huge one. Now you move on to the other side, you have Tuticorin here. Tuticorin. Or in the south, it's also said as Thuthukudi. Thuthukudi, but the modern word is Tuticorin. Then come up, you have Chennai port. Chennai. A little above Chennai, to ease out the tension here, pressure here, we have Ennore port. Ennore port. Another huge port. Ennore. Move up, you have Visakhapatnam. It's the deepest port in India. Depth of water, it is the maximum when it comes to Visakhapatnam. From Visakhapatnam you move up, in Orissa you have Paradip. Paradip. From there you move towards Calcutta, now West Bengal, you have Haldia. Haldia is once again a port commission in order to ease out the traffic pressure in the Kolkata port. Kolkata is the tea port of India. Tea port of India. Haldia. Now these are the key ports of India on the western coast and eastern coast. Sometimes you will be asked to give the list of all the important ports on the west coast or east coast. Besides all these, you have the port in Andamans. Port Blair. Port Blair. It's in the Andamans. That port is mainly used for naval purposes. Naval purposes. That comes somewhere here. Somewhere here. Andaman and Nicobar Islands are here. You see them a few here. And Port Blair comes here. You should be able to locate all these points on the coast of India. Practice well. One of these will appear. When asked to locate, one of the 4 items will be a port on the sea coast of India. We move next now. Means of communication. We come to communication. I told you earlier that communication happens to be our nervous system. We are seeing what the circulatory system is. Now, means of communication. Personal mass. All these are personal ones. Letters, telephone, fax, email, internet, These are all personal. At the personal level, we communicate with people in other parts of the world. These go as personal instruments. This is mass. When you want to meet lots of people, when you want to meet the community, then it's mass communication that enables us. Very important. Earlier we had the print media, mainly newspapers, magazines and journals. Now we have the electronic system. We have made big strides here as we started off with the electronic system. See, radio. After radio, we have now television. Then we have satellite communication, another big stride, and we have cinema, which has been able to make lots of thoughts, ideas, reach masses. Okay, 3 minutes. Next, mass communication system. We'll start with radio now to begin with. Radio broadcasting started in India in 1923. Not long ago, just about 98 years ago, radio communication started in India. It's a mass media because you can meet thousands of people at a time. By the Radio Club of Bombay, the first radio club. It was changed to All India Radio in 1836. What you call as AIR, AIR, All India Radio, turned to be very famous. Say till about 1980 or so. Then TV entered in. People started moving from radio towards TV. And to Akashvani in 1957, it became Akashvani, 1957. All India Radio broadcast a variety of programs related to information. Don't consider radio and TV just as entertainment mass media. More than entertainment, they do a lot of public education. They educate the public. Maybe through stories, movies, or broadcasts. We keep educating the public in numerous ways. So, related to information, you come to know what is happening in different parts of the world. Education, you educate the people. Then you have entertainment, provides a lot of entertainment. Today it is an era of entertainment. Era of entertainment. People sit glued to the TV sets. Special news bulletins, you get around all the 24 hours, you keep getting news bulletins. Within no time, news is broadcasted all over through radio and TV. Are also broadcast at specific occasions like session of parliament. You have the session of parliament or you have cricket matches. Even as the program goes on, you get the live telecast of the same. What a great thing. What a great thing. Something that man has achieved over the last 30, 40 years. And state legislature meeting is going on, chief minister is talking, opposition party leader is coming down heavily on the government. You are in a position to see it live there. Now, the new trend is FM channels, frequency modulation. You all know what is FM. In small cities and towns, you have FM channels. Clarity is there. People, they have it as the best means of communication within that city. Advertising, maybe, or the products that are available, or even when roads get blocked, immediately have an announcement on the FM. People can deviate into other roads. Modulation. So that helps in running small cities. And the television. Now we come to television. TV. Television broadcasting has emerged as the most effective audiovisual medium. Audiovisual. We have something to hear, something to see. Radio was audio medium. Audio. Now this is audio visual, AV, audio visual, has emerged as the most effective audio visual medium for disseminating, sending it down, sending the information down to masses, information and educating masses. Here people, illiterates, who have not attended any college or any school, they do learn a lot through these mass media. Initially, the TV services were only to the national capital, where it began in 1959. For about 2 decades, it concentrated only on Delhi, because we did not have enough funds to build it up elsewhere. And you need, it used to be terrestrial then, broadcasting used to be only terrestrial. When satellite TV broadcast started, say by around 1964-65, it was used only for education in the beginning, for schools, then recreational value, bulletins, all this started. National capital, where it began in 1959, after 1972, several other centers became operational. In 1976, TV was delinked from All India Radio. That's right, it will be too heavy for Akashvani to look into. So TV was separated and got a separate identity as Doordarshan. That was Akashvani. This is Doordarshan, DD. After INSAT 1A, we entered into the satellite technology. We were able to get our own, to begin with, we rented satellites of other countries, but later on we started having our own satellites. Today we have a network of satellites. We not only use it for our country, even to other countries we rent. National television, DD1, became operational. Common National Program, CNP, were started for the entire network, and its services were extended to the backward and remote rural areas. Now, remote sensing satellites are coming to use today. Sitting at the national capital, or the police headquarters, or the military headquarters, or wherever it be, you are in a position to know about another city or another remote area. The job that is going on in a port, that can be overseen from another point of view. Or if there is violence in a particular area, it can be studied by police forces sitting in their headquarters. Or military movements in the border areas, they will be able to see right in Delhi. It's all possible through remote sensing satellites. Without touching the object as such, you see the object, you see the activity from a distance, and it gets relayed to the actual headquarters from where you want to see. Remote sensing has been a very great stride in the field of satellite technology. It's been able to, even entire aviation services are controlled with the help of remote sensing technology. We have been able to take prints of maps of different parts of the nation, or the sea, or the jobs that are going on different places through satellites. Everything, or even the police are in a position to control or follow their projects, follow up their projects with the help of remote sensing and sending satellites into the orbit, or even going beyond that to the moon or Mars. All these do require remote sensing technology too. It's a big stride in the field of science and technology. Next, satellite communication. Satellite communication. Satellites are a mode of communication in themselves, as well as they regulate the use of other means of communication. They get them synced with all other kinds of communication. Satellite images can be used for the weather forecast. Almost apt and right messages we get from the weather field. It is mainly because of satellite images. Satellites take and what they relate for the weather forecast, monitoring of natural calamities, the cyclone, as it moves from one area to the other, they are in a position to monitor. Surveillance of border areas, supervising what's happening in the border areas and taking the necessary step. Now GPS. GPS, it's called as the Global Positioning System. You have satellites placed in the orbit in different parts around the globe, and they are interlinked, and you will be able to have the exact positioning of things well known with the help of GPS. It's a global navigation satellite system that provides location, velocity, and time synchronization. GPS is everywhere. It's there everywhere. You can find GPS systems in your car. As the car is moving, you can exactly know where you are located, where you are going. Or you can find out the pathway. You can find out the address. You can go to the exact address you have with the help of the GPS. Your smartphones, they all function based on the GPS. And your watch, they are all interlinked with one with the other. GPS helps you get where you are going from point A to point B. It will direct you, guide you. Remote sensing technology collects information about Earth's surface. All information, even including that of mineral availability or what is underneath the surface of the Earth, or the blasting of volcanoes, volcanic activity, natural disasters, everything we are in a position to know today with the help of the GPS system. Thank you.